Labor economics, the subfield of economics concerned with the study of labor as an input to economic production. Broadly, it surveys labor markets and the economic decisions of agents participating in such markets. Topics of study include the labor supply of workers and how it is affected by variables such as age, education, gender, and childbearing, as well as the labor demand by firms searching for different forms of labor as an input in the production of goods and services. In addition, labor economics studies, amongst others, phenomena such as schooling, human capital, inequality, unemployment, trade unions, discrimination, technological change, and public policies related to labor markets, such as unemployment benefits, pensions and health care. Macro and micro analysis of labor markets. Labor economics can generally be seen as the application of microeconomic or macroeconomic techniques to the labor market. A general assumption in the microeconomic study of labor markets is that workers, suppliers of labor, make rational choices based on the information that they know regarding wage, desire to provide labor, and desire for leisure, to maximize utility over their lifetime by consuming economic goods, services, and leisure. Conversely, economic firms, demanders of labor, seek to maximize profits by hiring these laborers. The non-labor force includes those who are not looking for work, those who are institutionalized, such as in prisons or psychiatric wards, stay-at-home spouses, children not of working age, and those serving in the military. The unemployment level is defined as the labor force minus the number of people currently employed. The unemployment rate is defined as the level of unemployment divided by the labor force. The employment rate is defined as the number of people currently employed divided by the adult population, or by the population of working age. In these statistics, self-employed people are counted as employed. The labor market has the ability to create a higher derivative efficiency of labor, especially on a national and international level, compared to simpler forms of labor distribution, leading to a higher financial GDP growth and output. An efficient labor market is important for the private sector as it drives up derivative income through the reduction of relative costs of labor. This presupposes that division of labor is used as a method to attain cost efficiency. Variables like employment level, unemployment level, labor force, and unfilled vacancies are called stock variables because they measure a quantity at a point in time. They can be contrasted with flow variables which measure a quantity over a duration of time. Changes in the labor force are due to flow variables such as natural population growth, net immigration, new entrants, and retirements. Changes in unemployment depend on inflows, non-employed people starting to look for jobs and employed people who lose their jobs that are looking for new ones, and outflows, people who find new employment and people who stop looking for employment. When looking at the overall macroeconomy, several types of unemployment have been identified, which can be separated into two categories of natural and unnatural unemployment. Natural unemployment. Frictional unemployment. This reflects the fact that it takes time for people to find and settle into new jobs that they feel are appropriate for them and their skill set. Technological advancement often reduces frictional unemployment. For example, internet search engines have reduced the cost and time associated with finding work and hiring decisions. Structural unemployment. The number of jobs available in an industry are insufficient to provide jobs to all persons who are interested in working or qualified to work in that industry. This can be due to the changes in industries prevalent in a country or because wages for the industry are too high, causing people to want to supply their labor to that industry. Seasonal unemployment. Unemployment due to seasonal fluctuations of demand for workers across industries, such as in the retail industry after holidays that involve a lot of shopping are over. Natural rate of unemployment, also known as full employment. This is the summation of frictional and structural unemployment, that excludes cyclical contributions of unemployment, e.g. recessions, and seasonal unemployment. It is the lowest rate of unemployment that a stable economy can expect to achieve, given that some frictional and structural unemployment is inevitable. Economists do not agree on the level of the natural rate, with estimates ranging from 1% to 5%, or on its meaning, some associate it with non-accelerating inflation. The estimated rate varies between countries and across time. Unnatural unemployment. Demand-deficient unemployment, also known as cyclical unemployment, any level of unemployment beyond the natural rate caused by the failure of markets to clear, generally due to insufficient aggregate demand in the economy. During a recession, demand is deficient, causing the underutilization of inputs, including labor. Neoclassical economists view the labor market as similar to other markets in that the forces of supply and demand jointly determine the price, in this case the wage rate, and quantity, in this case the number of people employed. However, the labor market differs from other markets, like the markets for goods or the financial market, in several ways. In particular, the labor market may act as a non-clearing market. While according to neoclassical theory most markets quickly attain a point of equilibrium without excess supply or demand, this may not be true of the labor market, it may have a persistent level of unemployment. Contrasting the labor market to other markets also reveals persistent compensating differentials among similar workers. Models that assume perfect competition in the labor market, as discussed below, conclude that workers earn their marginal product of labor. Neoclassical supply. Households are suppliers of labor. In microeconomic theory, people are assumed to be rational and seeking to maximize their utility function. In the labor market model, their utility function expresses trade-offs in preference between leisure time and income from time used for labor. However, they are constrained by the hours available to them. Some labor markets have a single employer and thus do not satisfy the perfect competition assumption of the neoclassical model above. The model of a monopsonistic labor market gives a lower quantity of employment and a lower equilibrium wage rate than does the competitive model. Asymmetric information. In many real-life situations, the assumption of perfect information is unrealistic. An employer does not necessarily know how hard workers are working or how productive they are. This provides an incentive for workers to shirk from providing their full effort, called moral hazard. Since it is difficult for the employer to identify the hard-working and the shirking employees, there is no incentive to work hard and productivity falls overall, leading to the hiring of more workers and a lower unemployment rate. One solution that is used to avoid a moral hazard is stock options that grant employees the chance to benefit directly from a firm's success. However, this solution has attracted criticism as executives with large stock option packages have been suspected of acting to overinflate share values to the detriment of the long-run welfare of the firm. Another solution, foreshadowed by the rise of temporary workers in Japan and the firing of many of these workers in response to the 2008 financial crisis, is more flexible job contracts and terms that encourage employees to work less than full-time by partially compensating for the loss of hours, relying on workers to adapt their working time in response to job requirements and economic conditions instead of the employer trying to determine how much work is needed to complete a given task and overestimating. Another aspect of uncertainty results from the firm's imperfect knowledge about worker ability. If a firm is unsure about a worker's ability, it pays a wage assuming that the worker's ability is the average of similar workers. This wage undercompensates high-ability workers, which may drive them away from the labor market as well as at the same time attracting low-ability workers. Such a phenomenon, called adverse selection, can sometimes lead to market collapse. One way to combat adverse selection, firms will try to use signaling, pioneered by Michael Spence, whereby employers could use various characteristics of applicants differentiate between high-ability or low-ability workers. One common signal used is education, whereby employers assume that high-ability workers will have higher levels of education. Employers can then compensate high-ability workers with higher wages. However, signaling does not always work, and it may appear to an external observer that education has raised the marginal product of labor, without this necessarily being true. One of the major research achievements of the 1990 to 2010 period was the development of a framework with dynamic search, matching, and bargaining. At the micro level, One subdiscipline eliciting increased attention in recent decades is analysis of internal labor markets, that is, within firms, or other organizations, studied in personnel economics from the perspective of personnel management. By contrast, external labor markets imply that workers move somewhat fluidly between firms and wages are determined by some aggregate process where firms do not have significant discretion over wage setting. The focus is on how firms establish, maintain, and end employment relationships and on how firms provide incentives to employees, including models and empirical work on incentive systems and as constrained by economic efficiency and risk/incentive trade-offs relating to personnel compensation. Discrimination and inequality. Inequality and discrimination in the workplace can have many effects on workers. In the context of labor economics, inequality is usually referring to the unequal distribution of earning between households. Inequality is commonly measured by economists using the Gini coefficient. This coefficient does not have a concrete meaning but is more used as a way to compare inequality across regions. The higher the Gini coefficient is calculated to be, the larger inequality exists in a region. Over time, inequality has, on average, been increasing. This is due to numerous factors including labor supply and demand shifts as well as institutional changes in the labor market. On the shifts in labor supply and demand, factors include demand for skilled workers going up more than the supply of skilled workers and relative to unskilled workers as well as technological changes that increase productivity. All of these things cause wages to go up for skilled labor while unskilled worker wages stay the same or decline. As for the institutional changes, a decrease in union power and a declining real minimum wage, which both reduce unskilled workers' wages, and tax cuts for the wealthy all increase the inequality gap between groups of earners. As for discrimination, it is the difference in pay that can be attributed to the demographic differences between people, such as gender, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, etc., even though these factors do not affect the productivity of the worker. Many regions and countries have enacted government policies to combat discrimination, including discrimination in the workplace. Discrimination can be modeled and measured in numerous ways. The Oaxaca decomposition is a common method to calculate the amount of discrimination that exists when wages differ between groups of people. This decomposition aims to calculate the difference in wages that occurs because of differences in skills versus the returns to those skills. A way of modeling discrimination in the workplace when dealing with wages are Gary Becker's taste models. Using taste models, employer discrimination can be thought of as the employer not hiring the minority worker because of their perceived cost of hiring that worker is higher than that of the cost of hiring a non-minority worker, which causes less hiring of the minority. Another taste model is for employee discrimination, which does not cause a decline in the hiring of minorities, but instead causes a more segregated workforce because the prejudiced worker feels that they should be paid more to work next to the worker they are prejudiced against or that they are not paid an equal amount as the worker they are prejudiced against. One more taste model involves customer discrimination, whereby the employers themselves are not prejudiced but believe that their customers might be, so therefore the employer is less likely to hire the minority worker if they are going to interact with customers that are prejudiced. There are many other taste models other than these that Gary Becker has made to explain discrimination that causes differences in hiring and wages in the labor market. Thank you for watching this video.